Oh my gosh, I am super, super excited to be here live for day one of the 4-day live stream series, which is basically just covering everything to do with authorship. So I'm going to quickly get ready to go. And I'm not sure if anyone's going to be joining live, but I'll hang around for a few minutes just to see if anyone does. Now let me think. I did want to mention something. So my internet has been playing up all month, and we did get it fixed last week, but I've noticed today that it's playing up again. So I am using my mobile data, and hopefully it does not run out. But if you do experience any tech issues at any time, please just let me know, because otherwise I'll just keep talking and I won't realize that something's wrong. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, I also want to just preface what this series is all about. And we have people live, hooray! So this series is basically, it's going to be 4 videos, and we're going to talk about all the aspects of the author journey. So it's basically just going over an overview of everything. And today's video specifically is really great for anyone who's in the writer or the author stage. And if you're not sure which stage you're at, because I teach that there are 4 different stages of authorship, then there is a quiz on my website. It's completely free, and I'm going to link it below so that if you're watching this, wherever you come through, and you're not sure where you're at, take this quiz so that you can figure out where you're at and what action steps you should be doing. So I'm going to quickly link that below. Hi Leilani, I am so excited that you're here live. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is the quiz. Now, it does say that it will help you find out which program is right for me as well, which it will, but you don't have to buy anything. It will also help you to figure out which stage you're at. The whole point is to teach you, you know, what you should be doing and all that stuff. So go ahead and take that if you're stuck. But just to quickly qualify, I mean, you can watch this no matter where you're at, but to qualify, today is really best if you are someone who is working on your first serious manuscript and trying to like polish it, and someone who is also working towards publication, maybe doesn't know which way they want to take yet, and is interested, like, more specifically in the traditional publishing pathway, or is trying to figure out if that's the right pathway for them. So that's basically what we're going to be chatting about today, because we're going to talk about best-selling books, query letters, we're going to talk about getting published in general, and we're going to talk about book blurbs. So lots of cool stuff there. So before I dive too much deeper into the content of today, I also want to let you know who I am and what the heck I do, just in case you are new around here. So hello, my name is Pagan, and I am a copywriter and I'm a coach, and I help fiction authors to tell and sell their stories. And so I recently pivoted into more specifically just book launch focused stuff. That doesn't mean that I don't teach writing anymore. I do teach it in my membership, my Authorpreneur Kingdom membership. That's where you can get the course to learn about writing, because that's really like a starting point for authors. But more specifically, I'm moving into just more marketing and publishing stuff. So that's basically what I help authors with now. And in the past, I've helped authors to do some really cool stuff. I've helped them to launch bestsellers within 6 months. I've helped them to triple their book launch results. I've helped them to overcome their fear of selling and show up in a way that feels good. So lots of amazing results there. And myself as well, my story is that I first got, so I got signed by a publisher when I left high school, and that eventually went bankrupt very quickly after. And so I spent a few years, you know, exploring self-publishing before I was signed again by a publisher. So I've done it both ways. And I've explored different avenues, and at this point in time, I really prefer doing it myself, the self-publishing route. But that's not to say that the traditional publishing route isn't a good route and isn't the best route for you, and that's what we're going to talk more about today as well. But that being said, I do have experience with both. So my first book launch that I did myself, that is, and the first book I ever launched and published was back in 2016, and it was a flopped launch because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was sort of, you know, Googling everything, doing everything I read on Google, and I had, you know, invested in editors and cover designers and all this stuff, and even despite all of that, it still flopped because I was missing some really critical aspects of my strategy. And fast forward to today, things are very different. So what I decided to do was get really clear on what I'd done wrong and what I needed to do differently, and then I decided I would help other authors to do the same. And as of today, I've published 7 books. I have more books in the works. I am a best-selling author, and I'm completely full-time with authorship. Like I do it all full-time for myself. I also run my business. I don't work in a 9 to 5. So that is what I do, and it's been a really fun journey, but it's also been very up and down. So I really like to help authors to try and get to that same outcome, or whatever they aspire to do. Maybe they want to take it part-time, maybe they want to, have a side hustle that they do and also write. So whatever they desire to do, my goal is to help them to live a more fulfilling, freedom-based life where they can actually focus on what they love to do, which is writing. So as I'm chatting about the content of today, I do want to let you guys know that if you're here live with me, you can drop any questions that you have, like any general questions you have about, publishing and querying, or anything that comes up along the way, and I will be doing a Q&A at the very end as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is writing a bestseller. So I actually got asked by April. April's a member of the group, and April asked what makes a bestseller, which is a really interesting question. And in my personal experience, I've realized that a best-selling book has very little to do with how it's written and how good it is, and a lot more to do with how it sells, which when you think about it makes a lot of sense. So I actually went ahead and studied a lot of different books and, actually how many books you're supposed to sell to hit different milestones in the publishing journey. And I teach a lot of this in my course Story Seller Academy, but just to pull up, actually I will pull up the example. I didn't think to do this. I'm going to pull up a really interesting example of a best-selling book series, or two of them, and basically what happened when they published it through different, publishers, and what they had access to the resources of, and all that stuff. It was just really interesting. So let me just quickly find that. But really, it comes down to how well it's being marketed and promoted. So have you ever noticed that sometimes a book gets really hyped up and everyone wants to buy it, and everyone is buying it, they're talking about it, but then you buy a copy and you actually don't like it, and you're like, why is everyone talking about this? This actually isn't that good. That is a great example of how a book can be a bestseller and it can sell really well, but in reality, it's actually not that great. And really, the best combination that you can try and aim for is to have a book that sells well, but also have it be an actually well-written book. And I think that's really important. So let me just quickly go ahead and find this example for you. 1 second. I believe it's down here somewhere. Yes. So this is just an observation. This is a case study that's in my course. I took a look at the Harry Potter series, and I also took a look at the Charlie Burns series, which are two very similar book series aimed at middle grade children sort of audiences. Now, they are both by British authors. They're both published by major houses. One is Bloomsbury and one is Egmont. They're both about a young boy who goes to a magical school and gets sorted into different houses. They both have a good and evil concept plot, and they are both, this is one key difference. One was enjoyed by children and adults, so it has a larger audience, and one is enjoyed by just children. So they also have roughly 7 to 8 books in the series, and they both have a spin-off series. So it's basically the same thing. And what's interesting is that Harry Potter sold over 500 million copies through Bloomsbury, and Charlie Byrne only sold 5 million copies through Egmont. And what that tells me, like the first thing I noticed is that one audience is bigger than the other, but the other thing it tells me is that they obviously had access to different resources through the different publishing houses. So oftentimes, big 5 houses tend to do, like their books tend to do really well because they have an established audience, they have the resources and staff behind them to make it work, right? But that's not to say that you can't have best-selling books as an indie author. It's not to say that you can't have that level of success at all, because it definitely is possible. It's just that you have a lot of sort of back work to do first, like you have a lot of legwork to catch up with, and it might take you a few years to get that traction going. But it's really interesting how basically the same idea for a book can sell differently, and I think it's just like, it definitely comes back to prove my point that it's all about how it sells and how it's being marketed and who's marketing it and who's receiving it, like the different audiences. So that's really what makes a best-selling book. But let's talk about that combination for success, because obviously you've got the book that sells well, and then you've got the book that sells well and is also actually really good. That's obviously going to bring you much better results, because a book that is also really well written is going to get talked about more, it's going to get raved about, it's just going to last longer in sales because it becomes known to be a really good book. So that's where I recommend really figuring out, how do you write a good book? And obviously this comes down to practice. Like if you're in the stages where you're still learning how to write, something that's really important is figuring out how to develop your writing style, really learning how to write and what your strengths and weaknesses are. So something that I do on some of my coaching calls is I ask the author to identify what do you feel you're really good at writing and what do you feel is not the best. Like when you come back and read over your manuscript again, what do you actually not like about it? Because that's probably an indicator that you need to work on that a bit more. You need to go take a course or take a writing class or go find a mentor who can help you to refine that aspect. And I remember when I was learning how to write, I would get really stuck with pacing. So I would know that something was wrong with my manuscript. Like I'd look at it and go, something about this just doesn't read the same as all these books I have on my bookshelf that are published and polished and doing really well. I'd sort of look at it and go, I don't know how to fix it because I don't even know what question to ask. I don't even know what's wrong with it. So over time, I realized that my pacing was going too quickly and that I needed to expand. I needed to add more description. I needed to work on my characterization and all of that stuff, and including character emotions and reactions and things like that would help to bring the pacing down so that it went at a better pace. And that also helped it to read a lot better and fixed the problem that I was identifying. So maybe you're identifying that something feels off with your characters or something feels off with your description or your dialogue or whatever it might be. That can be really helpful for you to know that something's wrong and then know that you can go and fix it. So, sometimes Google is not enough to figure out what is wrong with it. Sometimes you need to go give your manuscript to someone and be like, what the heck is wrong with this? And they'll be like, oh, it seems like it's a pacing issue, because someone who's more experienced can identify these things. So that's one tip. The other thing is to really understand, and this is something I teach in my writing course, is that when you write a book, it's not just about writing. It's not just about how it's written. It's about the story being told. So I teach a storyteller framework, and this is made up of a few different layers. One of them is the storytelling layer, and one of them is the writing layer. So I believe that you need to have both to have a really strong book, because I believe you start with the story. You get a story idea, you want to get from point A, which is the beginning, to point B, which is the end, and take people through a journey through your story, and you want to tell that story through characters. So there are certain things that make up the storytelling aspect of your book. And what's interesting is that when I was in school, I actually was more interested in drama than I was in English, because English was just, it was writing, it was all the technical stuff. I really didn't enjoy that very much. And even when we did learn about writing, like story writing in class, it was still not that exciting because it was short stories. However, with drama, I was able to write a whole story and put it into a play version and then act it out on stage and see it unfolded before me. So it was just a very different experience. So what I realized is that it's both. It's the storytelling aspect and it's the writing aspect. And the writing aspect actually comes after the storytelling aspect, because you need to have a story first before you can enhance the story, before you can make it read better and well. So that's another thing to really identify, is that when you're writing a book that people love and think is really well written, you need to have a good story first. You need to have something that people want to read that you can then expand on. So if you don't have that first part, then it's going to be very difficult for you to publish something that people really like. So that's something to think about as well. Now, a final thing I want to mention is that your first book probably won't be a bestseller, and that's okay. So my first book wasn't a bestseller, my second book was, and a lot of other authors that are, best-selling authors, very well known, a lot of them have had flop series before the ones that they have now that aren't even in print anymore. Like, you don't even hear about them because they did so poorly. And that's just another experience thing. Like, the first book you write is probably not going to be your best-selling book, and you can have a book that's good enough to publish, like something that's quality enough that people will enjoy reading it. It can be someone's favorite book, but it's probably not well written to the point where it's bestseller worthy. And that's okay. So I want you to be okay with that and know that any book that you write that you think is good enough to publish is a huge achievement. Okay, let's talk about getting published. Okay, so like I said, today we're going to talk mostly about traditional publishing, but just to be clear, there are 3 different ways that you can publish. So you can be traditionally published, you can be self-published, or you can do hybrid publishing, which is a mix of the two. So to be really clear, traditional publishing is when you sign with a publisher, like you enter an agreement, it's like a business partnership, and the whole idea is that they will publish your book for you and it won't cost you anything. So you're not paying anything up front, you're not paying any editing, any cover design, nothing like that. And their whole goal is to publish your book and sell it to their existing audience and, you know, work with you to make it a success. Now, the thing here, though, is that there are still pros and cons to both of these things. So when it comes to traditional publishing, you do lose a lot of creative control because you can't turn around and go, I don't like that cover, I want a different one. Or you know, if you are working on book edits, you can't turn around and be like, well, this deadline doesn't suit me. Can we do edits in May instead? Because they're working on their own kind of schedule. So you do lose that flexibility aspect. You lose that creative control aspect, and you also lose the royalty aspect. So obviously, when you are working with other people and you have a lot of people involved in the process, then you're not going to get paid as much because a lot more people have to get paid. And the thing about traditional publishing is that they work on a certain percentage model and it doesn't become sustainable if they change it too much. So because you have bookstores and distributors involved, they're involved no matter which way you do it, and they usually take a pretty big percentage to pay for all their overheads, which makes sense. A publishing house also takes a really big percentage, which again, pays for their overheads because they have staff, so that does make sense again. But that leaves you with a very small percentage. It's actually 6% of your entire sale every time you sell a book, which is not that much. So for me, that translates to roughly 80 cents every time my publisher sells a book, which is not that much, and it's really hard to make a livable wage on that kind of money. That's not to say that you can't, it just means that you have to be able to sell a lot of books. I'm talking up to 100,000 books a year, which is the exact amount that you would need to replace your salary. And on top of that, you need the audience for that. So you need to be able to guarantee that you can sell that many books every year. So that's where it becomes very, very difficult. Of course, the pros of traditional publishing is that if you don't have a budget, you can get started with them and you don't have to, be saving up a budget to publish. So that's one thing. You will have a support team behind you, which can be very helpful in some situations, especially if you work a 9 to 5 and you don't exactly have all the time in the world to be launching and publishing and marketing and editing. So you have people behind you to support you, which is also really important. So it can be a good fit for some people, but I just want you to be aware that you do have those losses. Now with self-publishing or indie publishing, it's kind of the same thing. It's very different. So you end up doing everything yourself. You are in charge of, your editing, your cover design. You end up making all those creative decisions. And what I like about it personally is that it does work with my schedule. So if you're someone who, maybe you have a really demanding job, or you have a family to raise, or you have, you're a college student or something. So maybe, it's not going to suit you when someone just gives you a manuscript and is like, I need these edits back by this date. It's just not going to work with your schedule. So in that case, it can be really helpful for you to be like, well, here's when I want to do it. Here's my timeline. And that way I can make it as flexible as I need. So that's one thing. Another thing is, of course, because you take out the publisher, your percentage goes up by a lot. And I mean a significant amount. That means that you're going to earn up to $5 for every book that you sell. And you only have to sell 20,000 copies a year, which is a huge, huge difference. It's much easier to do that. And of course, if you're indie publishing, it may be harder for you to build that kind of audience anyway. So having a smaller goal is going to be more effective. So all these things work in your favor. But of course, you do need the upfront budget to publish. And I never recommend publishing unless you have the budget to put out something quality, because it is a product. It is something that people are exchanging their hard-earned money for. They don't want to receive something that's really crappy. You do need to, have that level of respect for your readers. And, there's other things as well. There's that lack of support behind you. You do end up doing everything yourself, or you need to be able to delegate it. And sometimes you need the money behind you to delegate those kinds of things. So there are pros and cons to both. And I do have a more detailed video about this if you want to learn even more about the process. It's in my Launch With Me series on YouTube if you go search for that. Now you've got hybrid. So I do want to quickly explain what this is. So sometimes this gets confused with vanity publishing. Vanity publishing is the bad one. If anyone tells you that you shouldn't be paying money to publish, that is true. You shouldn't be paying companies to publish your book unless there's something in it for you, right? So with a vanity publisher, they tend to be very money driven. They tend to want to rip off and scam authors and not deliver on their promises. And you can really sense a vanity publisher because they're going to be very much about, like, they're very author focused. They're not really focused on marketing to readers. They're focused on marketing to you. And they want to promise you the best editing packages and the best, cover deals. They want to give you, like, promises that you're going to sell lots and lots of books and tons of stuff that just doesn't feel right, and you'll be able to sense that a lot of it doesn't feel right. With a hybrid publisher, the thing that makes them different is that, again, it's more of a partnership, right? So yeah, you may pay up front, maybe a percentage or the whole upfront amount to have your book edited and designed with, have their cover designed by them. But the thing here is that they have something really worthwhile that's going to serve you. It could be that they have a really great marketing campaign or a marketing team behind them. They may have the audience for it. They may be able to get you into bookstores and have like a really clear process for how to do that. So it's really worth your while to be working with them in that sense. But again, this is a decision that really should be up to you. It should be a lifestyle choice, and it should depend on what you feel you need the most support and help with. So if you do want to learn more about that, there's lots of information online, but that's my quick explanation of all the ways you can do it and what to be wary of. I also have a mini course on traditional publishing, and I do go into a little bit more detail in there about what to look for with the scammers, the vanity publishers and the hybrid publishers. I have it very clearly outlined in there, just so that you know. Okay, let's talk about strong book blurbs. So this is actually something I get asked about every now and then. It's like, what makes a great book blurb? I often have authors sending me their book blurbs for critique, wanting me to help them make it stronger. So I like to teach a formula when you're writing your book blurbs that makes it really, really strong. And this is the formula. So it goes hook, conflict, and stake. Okay, so you start with a hook. You start with something that's going to really grab your ideal reader's attention. You go into the conflict. You explain exactly what's happening. And then you go into the stakes. So you want to end with something that's going to really leave them wanting more. Something that very clearly indicates, why they should want to pick this up. So I have a lot of examples that I'm going to give you. Just one second. I'm going to give you a document, which I prepared earlier so that you would have this. So I originally gave this to my Perfect Pitch Mastermind students. It's a little mini mastermind I ran a few months ago, and I probably won't run it again, which is why I'm going to give you this document. So it is my blurb creation method, and it is a really great workbook. So what it has is it helps you to figure out, who is your ideal reader and what are they going to want out of your blurb. It takes you through all these great questions, and then it gives you examples at the very bottom of existing book blurbs, and I break down what's the hook, what's the conflict, what's the stake. So you can see examples and you can work a really great book blurb into existence. So I'm giving that to you if you are looking for it. But one example I want to share with you to help you understand this is the one from the Selection series by Kira Cass. And I like to share this one because it's very clear. So the hook is, for 35 girls, the selection is the chance of a lifetime. It immediately kind of makes you think, well, what's the selection, and what's this whole thing about? You kind of go into the conflict here. So it explains, what it is. It explains why people would want it, and what the outcome's going to be. And then it also has a catch. So sometimes a blurb does have a catch, just so that you know. The catch here that is introduced, and that leads into the stake, is that for America Singer, being selected is a nightmare. And that's what it says. And you kind of go, well, if it sounds like such an amazing opportunity where they can escape a life of poverty and they get to marry a prince, why is it a nightmare? And it makes you want to read on. And then it explains why it's a nightmare. And we get an understanding that there's a love triangle going on. And then she actually meets the prince, and she realizes that, she might actually like him. So for anyone who's reading this blurb, the really strong thing here that's being targeted as a pain point is the love triangle aspect. It's someone who wants to read about love triangles. It's someone who wants to read about the drama involved with it. And it's also for someone who enjoys, like princesses and that kind of general bachelorette style stuff. So all of that is very clear in this blurb, and it doesn't give away exactly what goes down in this book, which is really good. So at stake that, she realizes that she may want to be with the prince, but she's got this other guy back home that she wants to be with as well. So that's the clear stake. And that immediately makes you think, oh, drama, I wonder who she's going to end up with. So that is kind of going into another question that I got asked. So April asked, what should an author avoid like the Black Plague when it comes to writing their book blurb, and what must they have in the book blurb for it to really stand out? So I'm going to answer that second one first. You must have a clear stake. You really must know what the pain point is that your ideal reader is going to want to read about. So why should they care enough to pick this book up? And I kind of have an example here. So you know that saying that everyone has a price, right? So it's kind of like that, and you apply it to readers, and you think, well, you know, if I were to look at their bookshelf or their TBR pile or their Netflix to watch queue, what is in those things? Like, what is the reoccurring theme or thing that's in those, all that content? What is the, you know, is there a certain plot point? Is there a certain character? Is there a certain issue that you see in all of these books or all of these TV shows that they have interest in watching or reading? Because that's the thing, right? That's the thing that is your ideal reader's pain point, the thing that you need to really, really clearly communicate and touch on no matter what in this book blurb. So for everyone, it's going to be different because it's up to you who your ideal reader is, whoever you decide it's going to be across your books and your readership. And if you have different series, you can have different ideal readers as well, just so that you know. But when you're pitching in your blurb and you're pitching to, you know, publishers, agents, whoever it might be, you need to be really clear on what this thing is that's going to make people think, or it's going to make readers think, you know, this is the thing that I want to read about. So that is the thing that you absolutely must have. No matter what, you need to be really clear on that. Now, things that you should avoid, like the Black Plague. So I believe that these are the things that I see most. Is when readers give away too much in their blurb. Like, they either treat it like a full synopsis of the book and they just give everything away, or they make it far too long and they just sort of ramble on and on about it. It really doesn't need to be like that. So again, if you follow this formula, you can make it very short and to the point, and you only want to be clearly communicating critical information that's going to really sell the book to the reader. So that is all about book blurbs. And if you want more help, I definitely recommend going and grabbing that document that I dropped in the comments. Make sure that you work through that because it's going to really help you. Okay, let's talk about querying finally. So for anyone who's interested in publishing and, you know, reaching out to publishers, you may be wondering about this process if you haven't done it before. So there is a bit more that goes into it, obviously. And again, I have a really great mini course that goes into details about all this, and there's lots of information online as well. But when it comes to compiling a query letter and then also attaching anything that needs to go into a query letter, there are a few rules to follow. And so what I would recommend is, first of all, getting really clear on who are the publishers or who are the agents that you're trying to sell your book to, because it's going to be a specific kind of company or person that's really going to want your book. And so you want to be honing it down into people who seem to be sharing that interest, right? Or seem to be publishing that kind of book or working to sell that kind of book. So that's the first step. Then you want to write a query that really speaks to and sells to them. So here's a quick list of things that I really recommend that you include. So you want to include any prior experience that you have. And so this is something that throws a lot of people off. They're kind of like, well, I don't have any prior experience in publishing. It's not really about that. It's about prior experience writing books, any prior experience entering competitions, winning any awards, doing any kind of writing work. So when I did my very first query letter in high school and I had like no experience, I'm pretty sure I said that I wrote for the school's newspaper once or twice, that I'd entered a few competitions, and that I'd been writing for X amount of years. And that was like my experience section of the query letter. So you don't actually need to have like real achievements. It's just about, you know, proof that you've been working towards it and treating it seriously. Marketing plan. So this is something I didn't include in my first query letter, so it's not always needed, but it is good to include so that they know that you intend to take this seriously. So you can just include a few things that you've thought of to go ahead and market your book so that they know that you're prepared to help with that. A good one is just to mention that you have social media and that you've been working on building readership and a following, because that's definitely something people are going to look for. Steps that you've already taken to establish yourself. Again, this can be social media. It can also be having a website. It can be joining writing groups and, you know, connecting with other authors, anything like that that proves that you're taking steps in the industry. Steps that you've taken to improve your writing. So if you've worked with any mentors, if you've taken any courses, if you've just sat in on workshops that have been taught at a library, which is something I did, if you have been to writing festivals, if you had authors come and speak at your school and you went and attended that workshop, anything like that is really, really helpful, because that proves that you were actively working on becoming an author. You've been listening to professional experts, and it proves that you're taking it seriously. And then finally, market research. So this is the really important stuff, is to be putting in details about your book. There's all that basic information that they ask for, like your blurb and your pitch and your word count and stuff like that. But you also want to be putting in things like the similar books to yours, the genre, the word count, the target audience, and the trends. And the reason that they ask for this is because they need to know that it's marketable. And so if you're going to sell them something, you need to tell them that it's marketable, right? You need to be able to prove to them. So a good way to do this is to know that there are other books out there like it that are doing really well. You can give them examples of books and authors that they can then reference to see if it's something that is actually marketable right now. Another thing is to understand the trends in the industry, know what's doing really well, and be able to prove that right now this is a hot thing that people will want to pick up and read, so that they can prove that they can market it. Like, they want to be able to make that good business decision, whether it be an acquisitions editor trying to convince their CEO to take on this book, or it could be an agent who's thinking, can I sell this to a publisher? Is this going to get me my 10% of the profits that I'm after? So anything like that as well. Now, Joe asked a really good question on this topic. So Joe asked, do you feel that it's best to research what's popular or trends before deciding on a book, or should you just write whatever and hope that it catches on? This is an excellent question. So I believe there's two sides to this, okay? So up front, I will say that I have seen authors who have written what they wanted to write and published it and have had no success at all. And then they've actually studied trends, and they've purposely and intentionally written on trends that are current, and they've gone on to basically have a lot of success with their writing. And in those cases, like, it's proven to me that following the trends does work. So I'm not going to say don't do it, because yes, it does work. That being said, if you go ahead and you start writing something just because it's trendy and you have no passion for it at all, then you're going to find it very difficult to stay motivated to write. You're not really going to enjoy it, and it's probably not going to be your best story ever. So my advice is to try and find a middle ground. I would advise that you look at the trends and you see if there are any trends that either like that you're interested in, or that you think you could easily weave into your existing idea, and then try to blend them. But if that's not possible, something else that you can do is you can start off writing in a trend, and you can write a book in a trend, or you can do this after, and then you can write the books that you actually want to write once you have an established readership and you have proven that you can write books that people enjoy. So that's basically like, I mean, you don't have to do that. You can just write whatever you want if you want. But if you're looking to have real success in authorship and you want to put your best foot forward, this is probably the recommended method to go about. And also, if you intend to traditionally publish, it's another really important step, because they're not going to pick up anything that isn't proven to be trendy. Even then, they sometimes reject books because they have too many books that are similar. So that's another thing to be careful of. But generally, it's harder for people to take a risk on something that isn't proven to sell. So if you're pitching them something really left field or really different, and they really don't have any experience marketing it, they don't have the audience for it, then it becomes very difficult for them to sell, and it's a reason they may not pick you up. So it is important to maybe start with a trend and then move into what you actually want to market. Now, another proof of this is basically the genre of new adult. There's all these discussions in the industry all the time about how it's not a real genre and how it's not marketable. And to me, that just doesn't make sense, because really, people obviously look for it. They obviously want to shop in it. And you know, you go into a bookstore and basically it's in the young adult section, but they know what to look for. So why can't it be its own thing? I think people just make things in the publishing industry way too complicated. They make up all these rules that don't really make sense. And that's one reason why I really don't like traditional publishing. But if you are going to go into the traditional publishing pathway, then you need to be prepared to play by the rules of it. So it's something to be aware of, is that if you have new adult novels, or you want to class something as a new adult novel, you need to be able to sell it as a young adult novel. So like, again, it's part of the trend thing. So that's my advice on that. Hopefully that made sense. Before I go further, I just want to make sure my internet is still working, because I know it was playing up earlier and I saw a few people drop off, and I just want to make sure that we're still here. And I think we are, so that's good. Let me go ahead and finish up, and then I'll get to the questions. So in your query on that subject, there's still a few other things that you may want to include. These are not things that you have to include in the actual query letter, but just things that you may need to attach. So again, they'll ask for the specific way that they want you to do this, but you may want to include a tagline so that you can pitch it really strongly. An example tagline is my book Ryan Rupert. I always pitch it like this: enemies become lovers when Albany is forced to overcome her fear of the sea and join her mortal enemy Ryan Rupert on his family's island vacation. That's how I pitch it. Very, very strong and to the point. Now, you also want to include like a single page synopsis of your book. So they will ask you for what they want. They'll either say, we want half a page detailing what the book is about, or we want a full page, or we want X amount of words. Like, they'll tell you exactly what you want, and you need to give them exactly what they want. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The other thing is a professionally formatted manuscript. So a lot of people don't know how to format their manuscript properly. This is something I teach in my course, by the way. But when I first started out, I remember I was writing all these novels and I was doing it in Word, and then an author came to our school and I asked her if she could take a look at my manuscript, and she said yeah, and I told her I was interested in publishing. And the only advice that she really came back and told me is, you need to format your manuscript properly. And she said, here's how you do it. So she was like, you got to use this font, you got to indent the pages like this, you got to do this. Like, she told me the whole thing, but there's a lot involved. So the information is online if you need it, but it's also in my course. I also break it down because there's a few things to follow there. But you do need to be professionally submitting your stuff. So one other thing I want to mention is, in my course, the mini traditional publishing course, I share a 7-step formula for writing a very strong query letter, and I share my own query letter that got me signed. So I really break down how I write my query letters. I give you that formula, and then I share with you, this is the exact one that signed my 7-book series. So I show you like exactly, so that you can read it, you can see how I've done it, and basically have all the information that you need to do it really well. Now, I'm going to finish up with April's third question. So April also asked, what are the top 3 common mistakes that new authors make when writing their query letters, and what are the fixes for these mistakes? So I believe these are the 3 things, and I did have to ponder this for a bit because I think it varies as well depending on the author and what they're doing, but these are the 3 things I think people make the most mistakes on. The first one is breaking the rules. So obviously, like I said, every agent and publisher is going to have a different set of submission rules, and that can really frustrate some authors because, like, they'll do a whole page of synopsis, and then the second submission they have to do a half page, and then the third submission they have to do it differently again. And it can be very frustrating to write out all these different materials, right? But the reason that you got to follow the directions is because, like, well, actually, it does seem kind of stupid to me, but the point is that every publisher has a different process. Every agent has a different process for how they take on stuff, and they'll have asked for it in a way that they can go through, you know, in a way that works for them. So if you want to get a fast response, if you want them to be able to make a good judgment decision, they're going to ask for what they need from you, and it's going to differ every time. So just follow the directions, because the thing is, if you go against the directions thinking that it's stupid, or you're just frustrated because you already have materials and it's not exactly the same, if you go ahead and submit it like that, without following their exact directions, they're just going to not look at it. They're going to go, this person didn't follow directions, they clearly don't know how to do things, and we're not going to look at that. So make sure you follow the directions, no matter how frustrating it might be. Just go ahead and do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is not being professional. So I admit, I probably made this mistake when I first started out, not knowing how to write a proper query letter, thinking back. But a lot of authors think, oh, I've got to really sell my book to this person. I have to be really out there. I need to stand out because they get so many queries every day. So they really try too hard, and they'll try really edgy or prolific language in their query letter, or they'll just straight out try and talk like one of their characters or something, or they'll start with like all in capitals. Not the way to go. Like, it's too much. The point of a query letter is that it's professional, it's to the point, and it communicates really clear information. So you don't need to stand out. You just need to be able to sell your book properly. That's the way to stand out in a query letter. So another thing about professionalism is that a lot of authors don't take the time to do their research. They don't address the query to the name of the acquisitions editor. They don't go and look for who the acquisitions editor is on the website. Usually every place will have that information, or they'll tell you who to address it to, and if they don't, you should email them and ask. But other than that, they'll just say to whoever it concerns, and that just proves that you're not doing your research right up front. So really make sure you're addressing it to the right person, and you're writing it professionally. You don't have to be too formal, you just need to be professional. Now, the final one, and I believe this is the most important one for sure, is that the query letter ends up being more about you than the book. And that's definitely a huge mistake. You're not really selling you. It is a business partnership. They do want to know about you. They do want to know that you're a good fit for them. But it's more about the book. If they wanted to publish your book and it was just about you, hang on, what am I saying? Let me start again. If they wanted to enter a business partnership with you, and they didn't want to hear about the book, then they would be working with you. The thing is that it's about the book, so they need to hear about both. So the thing is that in your query letter, you're selling the book. You're selling all the metadata about the book. You're selling why it's a good book, why people want the book. You're also selling, you're talking about the market research about the book to prove that you know what's wanted. And anything about yourself, because yes, you do need to include stuff about yourself, but anything about yourself should relate to the book. It should relate to your experience in this topic, or why your experience writing the book. It should relate to your experience practicing as an author and building up your writing experience so that you could write this book. And that obviously adds credibility to your sales pitch because it proves that you are taking it seriously. So they really don't want to know about your cats and the fact that your mum loved the book and things like that, because it's not relevant, and it's also kind of unprofessional. You're allowed to, let people know about yourself, but you want to keep it to the point, because the other thing is that you don't want it to ramble for ages, and they have a lot of query letters to go through, so you don't want them to be reading about unnecessary stuff. So really, you should just tell them important details. If I pull up mine, for example, really quickly, let me tell you what I told them about myself. What I told them was all stuff that was relevant to my past experience. I told them that at the time I was the marketing assistant at a publishing company, because that's industry related. I told them about my past publishing experience. I told them I had a website, a social media presence, and ran a book blog. That's all I told them. And I told them my age as well, because I thought that might be impressive. But that's about it. I didn't go on to say, I love cats, and I'm from Australia, and I do this and that. It wasn't about that. It was this is the book. Here's why I'm a great fit to write this book. Here's why my audience wants this book. Here's why you'll love this book, blah, blah, blah. So that is all the important stuff. Now, hopefully that helps and answers your questions. I know that you had 2 more questions, April. I'm going to answer them on I'm answering them on day 3 and 4, because I think they correlate best on those days. So make sure you come back and watch those days, because I'm going to answer the rest of your questions. Now, does anyone have any final questions for me? Also, if you're watching the replay, feel free to drop any questions. I'll come back and answer them, of course. My blurb for the Techno Mage was short, but I did have one ARC reader who said it gave too much away. I didn't think it did. I remember reading through, and I don't think it did either. I think that there was a clear stake in there, so I believe it was fine. But definitely, one piece of advice would be that if you're really not sure on your book blurb, put it out there for people to critique. The other thing about this is that a lot of authors will want to give all their 2 cents, and then you'll get all these differing opinions, and you don't want to get too overwhelmed or confused. So I'd be really obvious or specific about what you're asking feedback on. If you put out a book blurb, tell them, ask them like, is there a clear stake that you can see in this? Or is the hook clear? Or does this make you want to read more? And then you can take their feedback and tweak it to how you want it to be, because they're not going to be like, I think that this book blurb is too long or too short, or they're not going to be like, I don't like the characters or whatever. Like, people do tend to come in with weird stuff like that. So if you ask for a specific piece of feedback, that's going to help you to get closer to what you need. So definitely run it past people, but don't make it too broad on what you're asking for. That's my piece of advice. No questions. That's excellent. Okay, so hopefully you found today really, really helpful. What I'm going to end with, just so that you have easy access for anyone watching the replay, is if you watch this through and you've decided that you would really like to try pursue traditional publishing, and you'd like the mini course that teaches more of this stuff, I'm going to go ahead and link it just so that you can access and find it easily. It is on my website. It's kind of hidden. It's under the programs area, and then it takes you to the courses area. So I'm going to link to the page that it's on, and I'll just quickly run through exactly what's included so that you have a really great idea. 1 second. Oh my gosh. Traditional publishing mini course. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning, because I know a lot of people already know this, is that my very first query letter that I wrote got me signed straight away. I didn't go through any rejections the very first time I did it, which is basically really hard to do. It's basically unheard of. So I do believe I have a lot of great experience with this stuff. Let me just quickly, it's the second mini course on the page, by the way, but let me just run through what's in here, just so that you guys know. Basically, it has all the information that I get asked. Like, I basically sat down and was like, what am I getting asked all the time about traditional publishing? I literally made it because sometimes I would jump on calls and someone would be like, I want to understand the traditional publishing process and I want you to coach me on it. And I'd be like, really? I could just give you a course that teaches you everything. It's really not that complicated. So what I did is I created the course so that when people ask me, I could just be like, here's my course. So it's really designed to answer all the questions that I get or used to get. So basically, it answers questions about the querying, the agents, how to spot a scam. It also shares it in 2 different parts. So in the first part, I talk about, or I help you to qualify, is this the right pathway for me? So I go into more detail about, traditional versus self, and I ask you specific questions to help you self-qualify, is this the right pathway for me? And then go into agents and publishers, what makes the 2 different, how to query both of them, because there is a difference. Where to find legitimate publishers and agents, because I know it can be hard to find these places, so I list all the proven places you can find them. And then how to identify scams and hybrid publishers. Then in the second part, I talk about what to expect when you go to traditional publishing route. So I really break down my personal experience in traditional publishing and what I have been through. I talk about what publishers are looking for in potential authors, and I give you a checklist of essential to-dos that you probably don't even know you need to do. Like all the things that you're going to need, all the materials, all the things to expect, all that stuff. And then I talk about how to write an irresistible query letter to capture your agent or editor's attention. And I give you my example of mine. And I also give you a bonus, which is a list of 100 plus agents and editors updated for 2020. But basically it goes into it gives you a starting place. Like it tells you what genres they're looking for, whether it's a big 5, whether you need a solicited or unsolicited manuscript. It just gives you a good place to start if you don't know where to start looking. So that's also really helpful. So that is there on my website. If you want more information, if you want to go and enroll, you can grab that and get instant access to it. But that's all for today. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking all about... What are we talking about tomorrow? We're talking about which publishing pathway is best, launching versus publishing, and the steps of publishing a book. So going more into that, doing it yourself kind of route, and talking about the indie publishing journey. I'm really excited about that because I'm going to break everything down. So thanks for joining me today. Let me know if you found this helpful, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for day 2. Bye.